Jules, I think to go all the way in all three competitions, I think you have to have more. You have to use your entire squad and use your whole rotation, and I think especially in situations like Liverpool, where maybe the difference between your starters and your reserves in certain positions isn't enormous.
Yeah.
It seems to me obvious that there's games that Connor Bradley can play. It seems to me obvious that we've seen the Tsimikas Robertson thing. It seems to me obvious that in midfield they have other bodies, other options, and not just Curtis Jones. And although I get the sense that Curtis Jones now is going to be part of the rotation on a pretty stable basis now. And obviously it seems obvious up front that, look, I know Jota's out, but he's going to be coming back. But,
soon.
Gakpo, Nunez, Luis Diaz, I don't think there's massive differences with these three. And those are the ones that he's been rotating, the most, understandably. But it is a kind of a trend with a lot of clubs around Europe. Or rather, it's not a trend. Sorry. Let me correct myself. Some clubs have stuck resolutely to a defined starting 11. Other clubs, like Atalanta, who just beat Napoli, he says he has an 18, 19-man squad, and he uses them.
Yeah.
Pep, arguably, not with his substitutions, and we'll get to that later, but with his starters, you look at that defense, when they're all fit, it's kind of a revolving door, right?
Yeah, completely, yeah.
So it's...
maybe when you arrive in a club like this, you need a bit of stability at the beginning, and things are working. So I can kind of see why Slot maybe is a little bit... not cautious is the wrong word, but just wants to keep it like that. Yeah, reluctant. Reluctant is perfect. Yeah.
He wanted to build his way of playing, and the way you do that, you need to have chemistry.
Yeah.
And you need to get results to win people over because you are, following a legend. And so he's done that. At some point, I would predict that he necessarily will transition away from this. And if we go through it, obviously Keller has been filling in for Alisson. Let's leave that to one side. It's goalkeeping. That's a whole different animal.
Yeah.
But Bradley... For Alexander Arnold, as I said, seems to be pretty obvious in certain games.
Yeah, it really is. Certain games. Because I think of all the positions you mentioned, this is the one where they are very different to each other. They play in a very, very different way.
Yeah, completely.
Bradley is just an overlapping right back, where Trent is nothing but that, everything but that. So that's the one for the others. Yeah.
But do you think, with the center backs, it looked like obviously Kwanzaa's had injuries early in the year.
Well, and then struggled when he played.
And then had some poor outings.
Yeah.
He needs either Kwanzaa and Gomez to be able to take minutes from Van Dijk and Konate.
Yeah, and I think Gomez did well when he came on at halftime when Konate hurt his wrist and had to come off at the weekend in a game where Liverpool, as we said, was second best, certainly when Gomez started the game. So Gomez is good. Kwanzaa, I just think they would be very careful with him because his confidence must be really low after what happened this season. But yeah, he's one for the future more. So Gomez could be in that rotation, especially Van Dijk is 33 years old now. For Konate, maybe, centre backs are strong and fit, obviously, and can play the whole season. And you rarely change, unless you're Pep, you rarely change Saliba and Gabriel and Fofana and Colwill, for example, or whatever. But yeah, I think Gomez can get some game time.
I think in midfield is where it gets a little bit interesting in the sense that Ryan Gravenberch, I think, has surpassed all expectations this season. Yeah. I genuinely thought they need a playmaker type, and they found one in Gravenberch, who I always kind of thought himself as sort of an inside midfielder, kind of like in the three on the side, rather than doing what he's being asked to do, being the more sitting, passing guy in the midfield too. We've seen McAllister play there last season. I think McAllister can do the job. So I would argue we're moving McAllister and putting somebody else in is the alternative, if you want, to Gravenberch. The alternative to McAllister, I guess, is Curtis Jones.
Yeah.
You could have Endo in some situations.
He's hardly played, yeah.
He's hardly played. He's purely defensive. But, there are going to be situations where he can give you minutes, especially off the bench. Szoboszlai, I think, doesn't necessarily have as much of an obvious alternative if you're going to play him in that role, other than maybe again McAllister, because he was used there for Brighton back in the day.
Yeah, and Jones played for Szoboszlai the other day in that kind of 10, number 10 position, which I think is probably the one that fits the best there to replace Szoboszlai. So the two can rotate. I would keep McAllister a bit deeper because I think in the passing game and his passing range, he's probably the best passer of all those four: Gravenberch, him, Jones, and Szoboszlai. And that's why I think he lacks him there. And he only didn't start the other day because he just came back from he had a little injury. But apart from that, he's been great. With Gravenberch, as amazing as he's been, we saw against Brighton that it's also, which is part of the learning curve of him in his new position, that he got overrun a little bit. He looked a bit tired too and jaded a little bit, which is normal, I think.
It's normal. But this underscores the importance of rotation, especially for players who aren't used to it. I don't think Gravenberch didn't start that many games when he was at
Definitely
Ajax.
Not.
And obviously coming to Liverpool, he came off the bench. So I think that's very much a position where you're going to have to give him a breather. You're going to have to manage his time a little bit, maybe save him for certain games. Up front, we went through, the alternatives are all there. Looking at Brighton before I get to Brighton, is there a broader message? Are you prepared to go out on a limb and say, okay, so if Slot is doing better than Klopp with the same players, plus Chiesa, who I think has played just a couple minutes more than you have, and he's doing better with those players, is there a broader message there about Klopp moving on, that maybe he moved at the right time, or you're not prepared to go there yet? Just asking. Don't shoot the messenger.
No. I just think after 9 years, it was probably the right time to get a change at the club. I think Klopp is such a demanding coach that a new voice with new ideas, not completely different, but just a few tweaks there and there, different personality, although with a lot of similarities with Klopp's personality, was probably a good thing. And especially, I think, when you keep the same squad together, if there'd been like 5 players leaving, 5 players arriving, and Slot, on top of his own philosophy, had to incorporate those new players, things would have been much harder. Instead, it's the same squad, which is a very good squad. Okay, a few aging players, a few players out of contract in the summer that you have to sort out, but also some really good young players, mid-age player if you want to. Perfect. So then you just have to work with that. The leaders are in place. Alisson, Van Dijk, Salah, who are the bosses in that dressing room, who are the key players. So what you have to do basically is, make yourself accepted as a new coach, but that's easy. He's a charming, really good guy, good coach. And then it's just changing, tweaking the few things that you want to be different. And that's what he did. So I don't know if he will reach the height that Klopp reached and if he will win Champions League and Premier Leagues. But in terms of a start, this is the best they've ever had, ever. Not
with the same group of players as last year, which I think says a lot about Slot. That's what I was driving at. That's what I find most impressive.
But last season, they were in the title race until March.
No. I'm saying for somebody to hit the ground running, to make Liverpool better this year than they were last year, at least in terms of results.
Yeah.
And thus far they are, without adding a single player who's significant. I think that's really impressive.
Yeah,
I think that's hugely impressive. People say, he's coming from the... people are saying this about Amorim at United, right? Well, it's too big a leap from the Portuguese league. There should have been, something in between that, the Premier League. This guy's at Feyenoord, the 3rd biggest club in Holland, and he makes the leap from there to Liverpool.
Yeah,
that is a big, big jump.
No, it is massive.
And I think he deserves a lot of credit for that.
Yeah, absolutely.
A word on Brighton. I get it. Brighton confused me because I feel like there seems to be such a constant churn. We're talking about rotation, right? Brighton are not playing in Europe, and yet there seems to be this constant churn of personnel. Like I watched Carlos Baleba a couple of weeks ago, and I thought, "Wow, this guy's really good."
Yeah.
Almost like Moises, who?
Yeah.
And then he comes out. Then that other dude played. I'm blanking on his. Is it Ayari?
Ayari,
yeah. And I'm like, wow, he's really good. Is it the system? Is it the players?
Yeah, I think it's a bit of everything, really. And when you think that there are players who are still injured, for example, like O'Reilly, who are going to come back and could also have an impact. When you think about Diego Rossi, for example, who's going to come in January from MLS, who's also a very talented player that can become even better and better. You think, wow. So, but we knew in terms of the squad that they had. The only
but these are not set. What I find interesting again, these are not settled. This is a new coach.
Yeah.
Right. I'm just contrasting him and Slot. This is a new coach who has not opted for a settled lineup.
Yeah.
Right. The players often change. He puts concept. Maybe it's because he can work with them more during the week, so he can maybe choose players who are fitter that week or whose numbers are higher or however he wants to put it together.
Yeah.
I just find it a really interesting contrast to Slot in terms of his approach.
Yeah, it's a good point. I also think that sometimes it costs them a little bit because they are a bit naive in the way they play. They're a young team, apart from a few that like Duncan, Welbeck, and those kind of guys. But overall, there's also a lot of young players there, and maybe it shows a little bit.
All right, last point on Brighton. I have a cynical friend who works in football, and he says, thinking about Brighton is a lot of their players are only really, really good when they're at Brighton. After they leave, if you look...
That's not true. No, it's not true.
All right. That's why I'm putting it as...
So who?
All right. Can you tell me what players have been better after leaving Brighton than they were at Brighton?
Caicedo is already better this season than he was at Brighton.
I don't think he was better than he was at Brighton. Not yet. He's back close to his left, but he had a whole year away from Brighton where he was several notches below. Right?
Now he's
he's still not 100, but he's not 100.
He's one of the best midfielders. The price doesn't matter. We should not look at price to see if a player is better now than he was
because
before.
That's the expectation when they leave.
I disagree. I don't think so.
Is Ben White better?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. Ben White is better than the player who was at Brighton.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, there's a production.
No, I think Producer Freddie was just giving us names of players who left Brighton. So who else? Who's worse now than they were at Brighton?
This is a talking point now. Obviously, I'm blanking. But Producer Freddie, can you give us some other names?
No, but the point is, because we should not look, the player cost 100 million, so he should be like Maradona now. We don't.
No, he should live up to his fee. So the expectation,
the fee is what somebody's ready to pay for. That doesn't mean because you cost 100 million, you should be the best player in the world and win the Ballon d'Or.
Nobody's saying you should be the best player in the world.
Well, yeah,
but
that's what you say. You play to your fee. You say
if you're willing to spend 100 million on somebody, that means the expectation is that he's going to produce on that level or something approaching that level. I don't think there's any argument that Moises Caicedo in his first season at Chelsea. And again, you can blame the club, the manager, blah blah blah, the madness, right? That he took a step back. Yeah. I would also argue Robert Sanchez took a step back.
I don't think Robert Sanchez was very good when he was at Brighton either.
Right. Okay. Was Marc Cucurella better at Chelsea than he was at Brighton?
I mean,
yeah,
it's tight. But like Trossard is better at Arsenal than he was at Brighton. Yeah, definitely.
I'm not sure Trossard was better at Brighton than he was at. Is better at Arsenal than he was at Brighton. I think he was pretty good.
But then you also he didn't play Champions League with Brighton. He played Champions League with Arsenal and scored in big games against big teams like Bayern Munich.
That makes you better. Like I mean,
you don't play them when you're at Brighton. I mean, you just said you need to have an impact, especially on big fees. The guy has an impact in the Champions League, and you said, does that make him better to be the best player in the game against Bayern Munich? So that doesn't count. Well,
not when you can't play against Bayern Munich when you're at Brighton.
But that's exactly what
I would argue Trossard has kept his level. Yes, I don't think Trossard is a lot better. He's a much better player.
Because it's your friend's opinion, so you want to go with him, it's fine. But I don't buy this at all. That players leave Brighton and are worse wherever they go to when they are in Brighton.
I'm not saying they're worse. I'm saying playing within the Brighton environment maximizes these players. When they leave and they go somewhere else, it's a different environment.
Yeah.
And there's probably more players who do not live up to their fee. This is his point. Than when they're there. Yeah, and I think in the case of, look, I mean, we can mention players who've lived up to it or who maybe have surpassed it. Obviously, McAllister was very good at Brighton. He's very good at Liverpool. Right. I'm not arguing that one, right?
Yeah.
But I think Caicedo, without question, I think Robert Sanchez, maybe just the ones who go to Chelsea.
No, but Caicedo this season.
Right. Levi Colwill, another one, right? He's going to be good because he was really good, right? But he was better at Brighton than when he came to Chelsea at first, right?
Yeah, but we're talking, okay. If we look at last season,
maybe it's just the Chelsea thing. I don't know.
No, I don't know if it's just the thing. I think if you look at now, but it's also when you play for a smaller club with no pressure, no expectations, It's true. And when you have De Zerbi as a coach, and then you go to a much bigger club with a lot of expectations and pressure, and you've got Pochettino and it's a mess, I think it's harder to do well there for anyone.
I was just throwing it out there, and to support you,
No,
I will mention a player who improved tremendously after leaving Brighton, and that is the star of Sporting. You know what I'm talking about? Center forward,
Oh, okay.
Victor Gyökeres.
Yeah.
Much better after leaving
No,
Brighton.
sure, that settles the argument.
go.
But it's a good point.